Good morning, guys, and welcome to the podcast. Happy holidays. Hope you guys had a fantastic Thanksgiving break and back into it. And so I want to start off with this question. If you had a coach who helped you perform at the highest levels, whether you're a founder, you're a startup, you're a team, and cultivate an Olympic mindset, what would that look like and feel like? And so today I'm really happy to introduce Lee Povey, and he is just that. He's a high performance leadership coach. He coaches founders, startups, teams, helps them to cultivate an Olympic mindset and unlocking leadership brilliance. And I'm really happy to have him on the show to discuss his experience, his wisdom, his expertise, and add value to the audience. Lee, welcome.
Morning. Welcome, Christopher.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have you on because I'm always studying the top performers, the top 0.01%, and I'm really happy to have you on to discuss your journey. I know you've done a lot of sports and living out in California, so talk about your journey and we'll dive right into the conversation.
Sure. Ask me what you'd like to know, and I'm happy to help, Christopher.
Yeah, how did you start out and what got you into leadership coaching? And we'll go from there.
Yeah, interesting journey. I was an athlete on the GB cycling team when I was 17 to 18. Realized I wasn't quite good enough to go to Olympics. Like I was good at national level, but I wasn't going to go to Olympics and win a gold medal. And at that time in the UK, there wasn't a lot of funding for sports either. So it wasn't a career that you could choose. I was stuck as to what I was going to do next. And at the same time, school was challenging for me. So without realizing it, I was dyslexic and on the autism scale, things I've only discovered very recently. So the messaging I got at school a lot was you're gifted, but you're lazy. And I never felt lazy, but I just didn't know how to fit into the school system. So there were some teachers I worked really well with and some I didn't. I didn't really understand how to do homework very well. So the school system didn't fit very good for me. Like many smart people that don't know what to do, I stumbled into sales. So I worked in real estate for 12 years, 6 years for a corporate company, which was fantastic. It was a great corporate company. I got a lot of really good training. And then they got bought out by another company and things changed very quickly. So I left and then with a friend started up my own business, started up my own real estate agency. That was obviously fascinating. I think I was about 26 when I did that. Started a business with a friend, has its challenges. A year and a half into the business, I actually had to let my friend go, which was at that time the most difficult and challenging thing I'd done in my life. And something that many of my clients face working with a co-founder, firing a co-founder, or figuring out that relationship. So it's great that I've been through that experience. But then I realized one day I was sitting there, I'd started doing some cycling coaching for fun and I was racing again myself. And I was sitting at the European Championships in Germany and watching an athlete race. And I said to his dad, I don't want to go back to my real estate business. It just doesn't feel right. I don't want to do it. So I sold it. And then that was the next business I created, which was performance cycle coaching, which was a high level cycling coaching business. And I did that for 15 years, the last 4 or 5 years of which I was also the US National Olympic Development Program coach. So coaching athletes towards the Olympics for USA Cycling in track sprinting. And then COVID came. And again, I had to pivot. The programs for USA Cycling closed down. None of my private coached athletes could train anywhere because all the velodromes were closed that they were training at. So my business just collapsed and disappeared overnight. And I was listening to a podcast of a leadership coach, didn't even know this world existed, and heard it and thought, oh, that's interesting. At the same time, was watching a show called Billions, if you've ever seen that show. Character in it called Wendy Rhodes. My wife, who's a psychotherapist, has her own private practice, looked at me and said, I think that's what you should be doing. And I said, very interesting you say that because I'm just listening to a podcast about this right now. And that's when I started my leadership coaching business.
Hmm. Yeah, what a fantastic segue into the discussion. And so the first thing I want to talk to you about is with this, resonate with this not fitting into the whole society. And I had to actually struggle to fit into the school system. But your question is when you have clients, you gain a lot of valuable insights into being a world-class leader. And so what is it that separates the really top leaders from the just the rest of them?
I think there's a lot, and it really depends on each leader. Some common themes I see, and these run across high-level sports people as well as high-level leaders, is they're very curious. There's lots of smart people in the world. So it's not intelligence is obviously part of it. You got to have the cognitive ability to do the role. So there needs to be a certain level of cognitive ability. But I think what really separates people that really excel is they have a curiosity, a desire to learn, and they're hungry for feedback. So if I think about my best athletes, they were the ones coming to me, coach, how can I do this better? Coach, how can I do that better? Coach, let's look at this. Coach, I saw this thing on the internet. Can we incorporate it? Which I loved. It felt like a nice collaboration. And I see the same in the best leaders. They're picking people like me to work with them because they're saying, how do I run my business better? And not just how do I make more money, but how do I help people be more fulfilled? So they're more purposeful in their work. They feel like they're part of the company. They understand what they're here to do. How do we coach them as opposed to tell them what to do? So the leaders that I think are the most successful are those that are the most curious, those that are asking a ton of questions, and those that are asking for feedback and they act on the feedback. So instead of having an ego and saying, oh, I want feedback because a book told me I should have feedback, they want feedback because they're looking to grow.
Mm. Yeah, well, really fascinating. And I spent some time in my early 20s just training under Olympic athletes and coaches. And one thing was just their mindset was just totally different from the rest. It's like they're still doing the very basics, but their mindset toward it is what propelled them to excel. And so moving on, what leadership lessons from coaching Olympic athletes can be applied to the business world, particularly in high pressure environments?
I think there's a ton, Christopher. I think one is you have to do it. So there's this expectation that everything should be easy if you're smart and if you're capable. Yeah, that as athletes, we know that's not true, right? You have to put the work in, you have to train. Nobody turns up and wins an Olympic gold medal, but certainly not now, maybe 100 years ago. But now the standard of sports is so high, there's no way you can just turn up and win an Olympic gold medal. So it takes years of preparation. I think societally, we look at people who are successful and there's this belief that it was easy for them. It's not. And it just happened overnight. And I was listening to a Guy Raz podcast the other day. And for those of you that don't know, Guy Raz has a podcast, How Did I Build This? We interviews entrepreneurs, wonderful podcast. And he was interviewing, or he was talking about interviewing the founder of Theragun. So it's a company that kind of sells recovery products. And the founder himself had a car crash, injured himself, and was looking for a way to relieve some of the pain of the injury. So he built the first Theragun, and it was just a jigsaw with a load of padding on it. He took this to trade shows and investors for 8 years before somebody would invest in it. 8 years he went round and said, this is a game-changing product. Somebody give me some money so that I can make it. It's now a 4 billion a year turnover company. And people look at that like me, and suddenly this thing exists, and you're like, oh, wow, where did that come from? And you think it just happened overnight, but it didn't. It took that man 8 years. So I think resilience, dedication, and commitment to a cause are super important. Now, when you're a sports person, in some ways it's a little easier because you have something to go for. You have a Super Bowl, you have an NBA championships, you have an Olympic Games to go for. So you know where that is going. Whereas in business, it can be a little bit more wishy-washy because really what we're trying to do is find out what's your purpose, what is the impact you want to have on the world, and then what's the vehicle that's going to allow you to do that. Because when you find that vehicle, that's what allows you to have the level of dedication needed to hear no for 8 years straight, to start a business and it fail, and then to learn from it, and start another business and it fails, and then to learn from it before finally you start the one that goes, oh, that's the business that works.
Yeah, I really love that. Next question I have for you is in any journey, especially it was great because I was talking to one guest and they were talking about just entrepreneurship is all about self-development and self-improvement. And some of the best entrepreneurs are they could be athletes or just recreational athletes, but just this physical, mental, emotional, spiritual health, which helps them perform at the optimal levels. And a lot it's entrepreneurship is not for the faint of hearted. So when we're talking about overcoming personal and professional adversities, what did your early experiences, and you mentioned dyslexia, vulnerability, how did that shape your approach to coaching and leadership, and how do you help clients out of those dark times?
Yeah, great question. The first thing is we've got to acknowledge it's going to happen. Right. It's not linear. It's not all fluffy cakes and joy and winning the whole time. That's not what it is. And actually that if it was like that, I don't think most entrepreneurs would do it. We love the challenge. We like the struggle. We're weird, right? We like the challenge of it. And staying on the weird and bit of an interesting way to describe it, I had no choice but to be an entrepreneur. I couldn't work for people that didn't have the same standards I did. I couldn't work for people that didn't care about things to the level that I did. I couldn't work with people that couldn't see the opportunities that I could. As I said, by 25, 26, I'm like, I can't do this for somebody else. I need to do this for myself because I want to do it better. There's opportunity that we're not taking. I want to do this better. So I think a lot of the founders that I work with, my people, they can't work for other people. They know that there's a bigger purpose for them, number one. Just going to work, clocking out, coming home, it's not fulfilling enough for them. They have this enormous desire for challenge and they have this huge amount of resilience. And often what I'm helping them with is how do they get other people around them so that they can build the thing that they're trying to build? Because what I find, the stage of the company I typically work with is when it's got 20 to kind of 40 or 50 people. The founder can no longer keep an eye on absolutely every part of it. They have to learn how to let go and they have to learn how to truly lead by empowering people and coaching people instead of leading by example. So early stage founders, they lead by example, they just do it. Right, this is how we're going to do it. Follow me. And it's a bit of a Pied Piper. I'm leading the band. Off we go. And then they've got to morph into this leader that steps back and goes, you are now the heroes of this journey. You step forward, you own this department, and you turn this into the best product department in the world or the best marketing department in the world. And I have to step back and go, you might know more than me about this particular subject. And that takes a big leap for a founder. And we see it in the sporting world too. Lots of very good athletes go to become coaches and they can't do it. And it's the same leap for founders. You go from being the star player to now, okay, now I've got to be the coach. How do I support these people to be better versions of themselves? Let go of they need to do it exactly my way. And how do I help them do it their way, which is going to help our company succeed?
Which brings us to our next question, which I really love this idea because you talked about example, then empowering. And no, they say that if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go with people. So, what are the key ingredients for creating high performing organizational culture, and how can leaders foster trust and empowerment with this example that you just described?
Yeah. I think the hybrid and the virtual work models are actually really helping this because it gives you the best of both worlds. So what you do is you come together for meetings, be that an on-site meeting or be that a virtual meeting, and then you go back into your silo to do your work. And I think that's super helpful. So you don't, in an office environment, especially as the leader of the company, you might have somebody knocking on your door all day long saying, hey, boss, how do I do this? Hey, boss, how do I do that? Now we're actually forcing people to be more independent and resilient because it's not as easy to do that. Now they've got to set up a call or they got to Slack and they've got to wait for their boss to come back to them. So I think part of the virtual world, and most of my clients are virtual or hybrid, part of that world is actually forcing this change anyway. And then it's how do we recognize how to make the best use of that? One of the things I work with companies on is how do you maintain a camaraderie and a good team ethos when people are scattered all over the world, all over the country, different time zones, and they don't meet in person very often. And a simple thing you can do is at the start of every meeting, instead of jumping into the agenda, you have 10 minutes just to catch up with each other, 10 minutes to be human beings. And when I first introduced this to companies, they're like, that's wasteful. And I think, well, what about the time that you would spend doing that if you're in an office? You spend way more time doing that. And human beings perform better when we feel like we're part of something, when we feel like we're aligned with a group of other people and we are chasing this goal together. It's one of the things that allowed humans to outperform other species is because we're so good at collaborating with each other. And organizations, startups are exactly the same. The collaboration and how we communicate with each other are really what matters. And then just before we move to the next thing, I think one more thing to really highlight is that communication is so important. And a lot of work I do with startups is how they give each other feedback. You really want to excel. Nailing down how to give world-class feedback is a game changer. In my experience, there's two types of ways that people approach feedback before they become skilled at it. One is they just don't give it, or if they do give it, it's very fluffy, it's not clear, nobody really knows what you're saying, and they're desperately trying not to offend each other. Or somebody gives very direct feedback, but it's only ever criticism. There's no praise. And human beings have a capacity to be given feedback that is matched by their capacity to be given praise, gratitude, acknowledgement. So the more gratitude, acknowledgement, and praise we give them, the bigger capacity they have to receive that observational, critical, performance enhancing feedback. And it's a thing that lots of high performers miss, myself included. I was terrible at giving feedback. I had to study how to give feedback because I was so bad at it, to the point now I give lectures on how to give feedback because I was so bad at giving feedback and I had to figure out how to do it.
Which brings me to my next question. And you talked about this idea where some of the best athletes make the most worst coaches. So, and a lot of that is skill, and it comes down to emotional regulation and emotional intelligence. Why is emotional regulation critical for effective leadership, and what strategies do you recommend for giving and receiving world-class feedback?
Yeah, I love that, Christopher. Emotional regulation is a really interesting one because I don't think a lot of people actually stop and think about what it is and what it does. So, do you mind if I do a quick bit of teaching?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And just take a sip of water to get ready for this. So, the way our brains work is any time we have any kind of stimulus, our brain runs through various cycles to understand what is that stimulus? Is it a threat to us? So, the first thing our human brains are going to always do is this thing a threat? If we perceive it to be a threat, we go through a service of do we run away? Flight? Do we stop dead in our tracks? Freeze? Do we stand back and fight? Or do we fawn? And if we put this into kind of ancient times, we walk into a plain, we see a lion, what do we do? Do we stop dead, hope it doesn't see us? Do we run away, hoping that we can outrun it? Do we stop and fight because we have no other choice and fighting is the best strategy? Or do we bring some steak with us and we give it some steak and that's fawning? Now, all of this happens in the modern world. Our brains haven't adapted out of this yet. So you get a text from a colleague that says, we need to talk. Our brain goes through exactly the same process. Right. What have I done wrong? What have they done wrong? Shall I ignore the text? Shall I run away from the text? So, what we have to do is acknowledge that your brain is going to go through this system. It's hardwired. It is what it is. It's the emotive part of your brain. It's around the amygdala. You can also think of it as your childlike part of your brain. And what we want to do is we want to move through that system quickly, effectively, and then get to the executive functioning part of our system, so the prefrontal cortex mainly. And we want to be making conscious choices. So instead of reacting to a stimulus, so we go back to the situation, somebody sends me a text, we need to talk. In the past, I would have gone, oh no, what have I done wrong? And I would be searching my brain, what have I done wrong? And I'd be getting ready for the fight. Here's my excuse, here's why this. Now I've taught myself and learned that actually most of the time somebody says I need to talk, it's not about me, it's about them, number one. So experience has taught me that and being curious to the process. And then the second thing is I trust myself, and trust is a huge important part of all of this. I trust myself that whatever that person wants to talk to me about, I'm going to be safe. I'm going to be okay. So once we can trust our own emotions, our own responses, and I will be curious, often those conversations are really fun and wonderful. And this person's coming to you, and typically they want some kind of advice or support. And they're not there to have a go at you. But human beings are very good at future proofing by thinking what could go wrong instead of what could go right. So we're now looking for how do we teach ourselves to look for the opportunities, what could go right rather than what could go wrong, and staying comfortable and confident in I will have my human reaction. I note it and I go, okay, where am I right now? Oh, I'm feeling this feeling. Right now, what would I like to choose to be instead? And then thinking, how would I like to behave and how would I like to respond? Another example might be, Christopher, you're driving down the road, somebody cuts you up. Your reaction to that is to flip them the bird and swear at them. And that's hardwired, right? That's the first thing you do. And then you feel anger because, this person nearly hit me, could have harmed me. And what I would encourage you to do is that's fine, have that experience, see if you can catch yourself before you flip them the bird and swear, and instead move to curiosity and go, I wonder what's going on for that person. Have they just been fired? Are they rushing somebody to the hospital? Have they just got bad news? Have they just broken up with their partner? And when we can be more curious, the world is a much more interesting place. And we're able to shift from blame to compassion because we're thinking, what could be going on for that person rather than how does that person want to harm me?
Mhm. Yeah, I really love that. We have a few minutes remaining. Talk about how people can find you and follow you and reach out to you and learn more about you and the work that you do.
Thank you, Christopher. I like to keep it simple. So if you Google Lee Povey, you will find me everywhere. So it's Lee Povey on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and my website's leepovey.com. I did some testing and it showed that my kind of gifts to the world are to take very complex things and make them very simple and then teach them to people so that they can make their life less complex, easier, and more effective. So I'm constantly looking for how do you make life easier for people to be more effective. So that's the way I've set my website up. It's super easy to contact me, fill a couple of questions in, see if we're a good fit. Typically, my clients, Christopher, are very smart founders to the point that they probably intimidate other people, have always done it themselves, and are now at that stage where they need support in how do I work with other people and be more effective. So going from being the superstar, as we said earlier, to now being the leader coach. And I usually, my favorite engagements where I coach the founder and multiple people in that same organization, and I coach them on how to work with each other. And I think it's incredibly impactful work where I coach these different people. I keep their stuff secret and private, so I don't discuss what's discussed in the sessions. But I will say to somebody, if you want to be really effective with Bob, try the messaging like this, and that's the way to be most effective with Bob. And then if you want to be really effective with Janet, try this way instead. So that I'm teaching them how to be most effective with each other. And then we do group calls with each other where people get to air their grievances with the support of a coach there so that it doesn't turn aggressive or too much conflict. And I help them work through those conflicts and those challenges. And they leave the calls and without fail, every time everybody leaves the call, they leave saying that they feel more joy and they feel more connected with each other.
Yeah, I love that. Thanks so much for coming on in such an insightful podcast and incorporating the Olympic mindset and the whole human leadership model with business and entrepreneurship and growth and scaling. And thanks so much for coming on and keep up the great work.
Thank you, Christopher. Lovely to meet you.